Hello, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter, your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer on SI and the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. It's great to be with you today. Got a lot of information. We got a lot of Raider news and nuggets and a lot of combine information for you as we kind of wrap up the combine. Our focus now will turn to free agency starting the first of the week. But a lot of stuff. So we're going to fly through it and going to give you a ton of information. I want to start with Tom Brady. Talked to numerous people at the combine, and I had an executive tell me that he had seen uh, my podcast where I was defending Tom Brady, and I mentioned in my podcast that my job is to not carry the water for the Las Vegas Raiders. I don't work for them. I'm not paid by them. And I always laugh when ignorant people say things like, well, Hondo has to be nice because if he's not, they'll pull his credentials. Absolutely not true. I'm a member of the Pro Football Writers Association. The Raiders understand that the media has a job to do. That's just the way of the NFL works. And I said that I don't have any problem if people want to be critical of Tom because they say that he didn't land Ben Johnson. Okay, he didn't. Do I think the Raiders could have done more to land Ben? Uh-huh. But they knew where they were not willing to negotiate. And quite frankly, I think they're better off without him. I've said multiple times, you don't come. The Raiders is a historic franchise. It's one of the few franchises where you don't have a coach come to learn how to coach. By the way, I'm going to be addressing that tomorrow. And they knew where they were going to not cross a line. When it comes to Matthew Stafford, they were willing to pay $100 million over 2 years. I mean, they were all in. They were incredibly aggressive for the best potential available veteran. They were by far the most aggressive. And I told you how Matthew took less money. So, anyways, they just said to me, do Raider fans really believe that they're even in the conversation with Ben or even have a shot with Matthew if Tom wasn't there? And I said, I think there are some that do. And he just shook his head. I mean, Tom Brady is the reason that the Raiders, with what they've done over the last 20 years, are even in these discussions. And I think he deserves some respect for that. Not carrying his water, not in the least bit. It's just factual. And that's my job. When you want to hear it, that's great. And when you don't, that's great. I'm not going to change how I report. And I just thought it was interesting that a executive saw that and made the comment. So let me first start by saying I asked multiple executives a lot of different questions, spent a ton of time with them, and then texted furiously last night uh, asking for input and thoughts. And I'll give you some parameters and things as I go through each of these nuggets. First of all, what I thought was interesting, and by the way, I am not a Buckeye fan. I'm from the state of Michigan. State of Michigan are not Buckeye fans, although I am a Spartan. And the enemy of your enemy is your friend. So Michigan State has a better relationship with Ohio State because both schools can't stand Michigan. Well, I think most people can't stand the Michigan Wolverines, except Michigan Wolverine fans. But I'm not a Buckeye guy at all in the least bit. And I had multiple people say to me they have never been more impressed with a group of athletes from one school than they were with the Ohio State guys. And I thought that was very telling. They talked about they were so well prepared for the combine, the question and answer period, extremely complimentary of their teammates, complimentary of coaches, critical of themselves. One guy said to me that, and I'm paraphrasing here, but one guy said to me, it used to be Georgia were those guys. Everyone wanted Georgia kids. They were prepared, ready, and he said it was marked difference. Ohio State, clearly it wasn't even close. So when I mentioned to a few other people, I talked to one AFC scout. I said, "What'd you think of the kids from Ohio State?" And he says they were so impressive. So, anyways, I thought that was it. an interesting note. I think well, just interesting note. I think it's going to play well for Chip Kelly, and I think if Ryan Day continues to win at a very high level, um, now that he's lost like a Chip Kelly and Knowles starts building on his staff, I think he will get some NFL interest. We'll see. I just thought that was interesting. All right, let's talk about Ashton Genty. Um, as you know, coming into this, or some call him Genty, we use the term Genty, the running back out of Boise. He was considered the number one back. O'Marion Hampton was number two. I can now tell you that on the bulk of the people I spoke to, and I did not speak with people from all 32 teams, but I spoke high double digits. Uh, I would say there are more who like Omarion Hampton, who I told you was the number two guy. But the interest, the reason may surprise you. So Gene T's had some issues with fumbling. And when they measure at the combine from the wrist to the shoulder, because that's where you snug the football in. I had a scout from an NFC team. No, it was an executive from an NFC team tell me at dinner that the measurements of Gene T were small there. And they think that may have something to do with the fumbling. I thought that was fascinating. I heard that from more than one person, by the way, but that was the first. And so you can't fix that. If a guy doesn't plant his foot in the right spot, or maybe doesn't have his eyes on the right spot, or his hands or his body, you could coach all that. That's why when you hear me use terms like, that guy has God given skills you can't teach. Well, that's height, weight, speed, that kind of stuff. That's with Gene T, that was a concern. I think everybody still thinks he's a great back. But in the NFL, he's going to be facing a much bigger level of competition, a much higher and stronger level of competition. And if there's fumbling issues that you can't fix, you may not remember this, but there was a running back, because some of you are very young, named Tiki Barber. No, it was Tiki. No, it wasn't his brother Rondi. It was Tiki. Tiki went to the New York Giants and had fumbling issues. And under Tom Coughlin, they were able to fix it. And actually, he held the ball high and all of that. So that's and it wasn't because of the length here, but that issue now is being looked at. Is Gene T something you can fix with how you hold the ball? But I can tell you this now: O'Marion Hampton has overtaken him as the top guy, which I told you all along he was a complete stud. Um, just keep that in mind. I thought that was an interesting move, all because of a measurable, all because of a measurable. And like one guy said to me, Gene T didn't play the greatest competition in the world at Boise State, and he had those fumbling issues. So when they saw that, they're like, okay, what's he going to do in the NFL where everybody's big, fast, and strong? Interesting. I thought that was very fascinating. Great kid. Everybody loved him. Nothing character wise. It's just literally, you may say, well, that's dumb. Okay, maybe it is for you, but the NFL people have learned to trust their numbers. Okay, Dylan Gabriel came in at 5'10", which is what he did at the Senior Bowl, which was good for him. They would have liked him to be a little higher, but I will tell you that Dylan Gabriel had some really good interviews. He impressed a ton of people. Still not big. But several people referenced all of his experiences, all of his tape. Like one guy said, you know exactly what you're getting with him. But he impressed people with his ability to read defenses. That's something that they talked with him about, and he really impressed people. Another guy that really benefited big time from this combine was Will Howard. I had one general manager say to me, and I'm sorry, I keep looking down at my notes. He said, I don't know if the Raiders take him or not, but wherever he gets picked, he owes Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly made him a lot of money. He was prepared. Um, but Will Howard was extremely impressive in interviews. You may remember, I told you before the combine, I talked with a general manager who told me that his team had a 5th round grade on Will Howard. And he said, but if Chip Kelly were my OC like he is with the Raiders and he had 0 concerns, I'd look at him in the 3rd. And I talked to this GM late last night, maybe even been early this morning. I don't remember now, but it was late or early. And he said to me, Will's certainly moved up in our value. So again, Will Howard had a really, really good one. Jalen Milroe, very impressive. There were a lot of people that were pleasantly surprised at him. Very pleasantly surprised by him. Uh, his answers were tremendous. His knowledge was extremely impressive. Um, I want to be careful how I word this next one. I think the change in coaching maybe hurt him a little bit with Alabama. Just leave it there. But Jalen Milroe impressed a lot of people. Um, just very good. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. One of the teams asked Jalen Milroe um, a series of questions about what he was really good at, and he gave them answers, which they did with everybody. And then they said they asked him what he could get better at. And his answer was, how much time do you have? And the guy goes, we're sitting there interviewing Jalen Milroe, and he's telling us all the areas that he's working on right now. To which this team said to him, are you not concerned pointing out those things to us would concern us? And he basically said to him, I wasn't in the room, but basically said, you should be concerned of any guy that comes in this room who hasn't played a down of NFL football and doesn't tell you that he has weaknesses or that he isn't working on them. Plus, it's an insult because that means he doesn't think you know how to watch film. Phenomenal. He knocked it out of the park. That guy said to me, of all the quarterbacks, and several were very impressive, he said Milroe just blew him away. They really liked the way Milroe answered questions, the way he had answers. One little note on Milroe, someone said this. He said, no ego. I thought that was really interesting. Okay, let's talk about uh, yeah, okay. I want to get into one other thing at quarterback. So let's talk about Cam Ward. So I had a person text me yesterday saying Cam Ward looked great throwing. And then I got home and found out he didn't throw. So it blew me off. So late last night I texted him and said, hey, you told me he looked great throwing. Then I found out he didn't throw. What was that about? And he go, evidently, Cam Ward was down on the field throwing to guys, just helping them warm up. And it was very interesting, just some of the things that we're seeing there. And so I thought that was interesting because I'd gotten the thing that he had been impressive. Cam Ward is clearly the number one quarterback. Okay. I have shared with you all along. I know there's people in the media who do disagree with me, including those in the Raider media. And I like them. They're good guys. They're my friends. I'm only telling you, my opinion doesn't matter. I'm only telling you what NFL people are telling me. And Jackson Dart is the number 2 guy among I would say 95% of the people I speak to, teams, Jackson Dart's number 2. But none of them think he's a dude. And none of them think Cam Ward is a dude, which is a can't miss. But they all think he's best. That said, if the Raiders don't take Shedeur at 6 or somebody move up who loves him, Shedeur could take a tumble. And I'm not going to get a lot into Shedeur. I heard some things. I'm not going to get into a lot. None of it was character. Nobody thinks that Shedeur Sanders is a bad kid. But I had one interesting comment from someone. As I watched his film last year, The thing that kept hitting me was when we looked at him after year 1 at Colorado and did our notes and evaluations. My notes and evaluations from last year were almost the same. It's as if he just didn't improve, even though the team did. I thought that was fascinating. I just think there is a lot of people that think Shador could be really good in this league, but a high pick on him is just a huge risk. I have no idea what the Raiders think of him. I sincerely don't. I know they scouted him a lot. I know they've looked at him a lot. I know what I think, but no one has definitively said anything to me. So because of that, I'm not going to say anything definitively to you. I'm just telling you, Shador is, Jackson Dart is probably 90 to 95% of the people I talk to, the second best quarterback in this class. And it's a class of quarterbacks with no dudes. I'm going to talk about Gray Zabel, the offensive lineman, the most versatile. Now, you may remember we were the first to talk to you about he killed it at the Senior Bowl. Now, I was not at the Senior Bowl. I was going to the Senior Bowl, did not go because the Raiders were hiring a coach and GM. But people I talked to, the NFL executives at the Senior Bowl, all told me, all raved about Gray Zabel. Gray Zabel is out of North Dakota State University, and I was told by one guy I think he could play all 5 positions, literally from right tackle to left tackle and everything in between. Uh, Zabel crushed it at the combine, absolutely crushed it. Now I'm going to tell you this: I know that the Buccaneers really liked Zabel, and so that would lend me to believe that Spytech does as well. He's a Spytech type of player. I, in my last mock draft, had the Raiders, well, my first, had the Raiders taking him at the top of the second round and said he was a first round talent. But because there are so many bad drafting teams, I would expect Gray Zabel, there was a chance Gray Zabel could fall there. I can tell you right now, he is not falling out of the first round. If he does, there is going to be so many teams making some really stupid picks. This kid can play all 5 spots at a high level. You pick him, you find your weakest position on your team, on your offensive line, and put him there. Just put him there. He's a stud, an absolute stud. All right, I want to talk about the Raiders are really willing to be aggressive at quarterback, but they are tempering it with intelligence. Now, I know that what I'm about to tell you, a lot of Raider fans are going to get mad about. That's fine. Just whatever. They were willing to pay Matthew Stafford more than anything else. $50 million a year for 2 years, $100 million, which I've already talked about. I'm not guessing on that figure. I was told by somebody with direct knowledge. They were willing to do $100 million for 2 years. They were not going to give up, which I've told you all along. They were not going to give up a 1 for him. A 1 this year or next year. They weren't going to give up a 1 for a guy that's there 2 years. That's not intelligent. If you're not a quarterback away from winning a Super Bowl, okay, Tampa Bay felt like they were a coach away from winning a Super Bowl, so they make a big trade with the Raiders and get John Gruden. Okay? If the Raiders felt like the only thing between them and a Super Bowl was a quarterback, they would have given up a 1 for him, but they didn't feel that way. And so the Raiders were like, "Listen, we'll pay him all the money. We're not worried about that. We're not worried about that. But we're not going to give up our future for a 2-year guy." I'm sorry. I personally, for selfish reasons, would have liked to have seen Matthew Stafford in Vegas. I personally, because I care about the people in the Raiders and I want them to do well. I purposely would have wanted to see it because I think it would have been good for the franchise. I also find it interesting that had the Raiders upped their offer, the Rams wouldn't have made nice with Matthew. I think that's something to watch. Just keep an eye on that. But I also think it's smart. Now, I've been telling you all along, I've known Spytek for 20 years. The guy's smart. He's super smart. He is a one of the things that made him successful at Michigan was he knew what he wasn't. And he didn't try to fool himself into thinking he was something that he wasn't. I told you when he came to the Detroit Lions as an intern, he didn't try to be who he wasn't. They give him one job, he'd do two. Everything from riding in cop cars to picking people up to coming in to visit or not because they're in trouble, or to taking people to the airport to doing analytics stuff. And Tom Brady, we all know he's smart. And Pete Carroll, smart. Chip Kelly, smart. They felt like, without a doubt, the best quarterback available was Aaron Rodgers, sorry, Matthew Stafford. And they were willing to pay him best quarterback available money. I was told that is not going to be the case. They're not going to just go throw $50 million at anybody but they are going to be very aggressive. Very. But it has to be tempered with intelligence. Now, I am not naming any names, but I was told by somebody who I greatly respect, he doesn't think the Raiders are done. They're going to keep calling around. And they may talk to some teams who you don't even think the quarterbacks are available. Hey, we're just kicking the tire. Is your guy available? Is your guy available? Are you going to have to pay him and not be able to afford it? Is your guy available? If they think he is an elite guy, the Raiders are players. Now, having said all this, let's dig into this a little bit more. I think I should really intrigue you about the intelligence that the Raiders are showing in this quarterback search. So let's talk about Sam Darnold. You may remember we reported to you back at the owners' meetings that his number was going to be about 40 million. That is still the number that everybody thinks. You may also remember that we reported to you back when no one was thinking this way, that we were hearing the Vikings may use the franchise tag. Please follow with me here for a moment. If the Vikings use the franchise tag and don't sign him to a long-term deal, okay, it could absolutely be for trading value. However, that means a team is going to have to be willing to put a long-term deal on the table for Sam Darnold. Now, I'm not saying that the Raiders wouldn't look at a deal for Darnold. I think that they probably would. Man, I had an executive say to me last night, if they franchise him thinking trade, they better have a deal in place. And they better go to Sam and say, we're going to franchise you, but hey, we got a chance to trade you. He goes, because if they franchise him and Sam says, I'm not going, I'll retire, which I don't expect him to do. I'm not saying that, but I won't go. No, I signed a franchise tender with you. Because what if a team isn't willing, if he says, no, I'm not going to sign a long-term deal. If you want to trade me to XYZ, that's fine. I'm not signing a long-term deal with them. Then what is XYZ going to do? How much are they willing to give up? If they franchise him with the intent of trade, then it gives Darnold a lot of power. Because he can just say, no, I don't want to go to that team. So if you trade me, I'll go play under the franchise tag. I will. But I'm not going to sign a long-term deal. Or, okay, I'll sign a long-term deal, but I want 4 years, 200 million guaranteed. I think it's going to be hard to find a team that will give Sam Darnold 40 for 3 guaranteed, 120 million. So they're playing if like one guy said to me, if they're going to franchise him, they better know somebody's going to trade and be willing to make a deal that Sam would take, or they better be thinking, all right, we're going to franchise him so we don't lose him and try to get him to a long-term deal. If that happens and they sign him to a long-term deal, then I absolutely expect JJ McCarthy to be available. You say, what's that got to do with the Raiders? A couple things. Without a long-term deal, I don't think JJ's available. With a long-term deal, I do think he is. Then the question is, do the Raiders think he's worth the number 6 pick? I think there are some. All right, let me rephrase that. I know there are some in the organization that think he is. I do know that. I have no idea if Tom Brady does. And that's the only opinion that matters. But I find that to be fascinating. So really watch that Sam Darnold, but it's been really interesting to watch how that has kind of played out as we've told you since the owners' meeting. Lex, I want to get to Will Campbell, the LSU offensive tackle. A complete man. There's a term kids use today called he's him. I know to those of us over 40 that doesn't make a lot of sense, but it basically means that guy's a big deal. I think I'm probably presenting that right. I wish my son were here. I'd ask him. He's 19. He knows all of that young term. But Will Campbell was him. He impressed in every area. Absolutely impressed in every area. Him and Gray Zabel both and had great combines and great interviews, but just keep your eye on Will Campbell. He is not a guy that can play all 5 spots, but he is at which Zabel can, but he is a dominant tackle. I had one person tell me, I asked him, is he Joe Alt, Talise Fawaga? And he said, no, but very close. And said, I may change my opinion of that after his pro day. So that's how good he is. That's a legitimate dude. Well, that's all right. Rephrase that. Nobody has used those terms yet, but could be. But he's a legitimate dog. Now, here's interest. Y'all know what I think of Thayer Mumford and Delmar DJ Glaze, the mule. Y'all know what I think. Y'all know that I think they're both two really good young guys. Okay. But I am getting the impression that if the Raiders had an opportunity to get a dominant right tackle, I'm not saying it's the priority position. That may be something that they greatly look at. That they want a dominant line. A dominant line. So I'm just throwing that out there because of Will Campbell, because of how good he did. Another guy that had a massive combine was Matthew Golden, the wide receiver out of Texas. There were some people, even going back late in the draft, that had him. Hold on, I'm going to look at my notes here, see if I can find it in my notes. Late in the combine. That they thought there was a chance he could drop to the 3rd. Think about that one for a second. In fact, let me go back and look. Yeah, that thought he could drop to the 2nd. He flew at the combine, showed off intelligence, smarts, thinking ability. He went up and one team asked him about cover 3, cover 2, press, over under, routes. And he's he's just drawn everything out like he was an offensive coordinator. That is a name to think, Matthew Golden. I was told that the Raiders really think the world of that kid. I was told they thought that before the combine and that they think it now. I had one, actually, I had A couple of people tell me they don't even think Xavier Worthy from last year even remotely compares to him. That's a big deal. Uh, Here's a note that I thought was fascinating. Y'all remember what Aiden O'Connell did in 2023, the last half of the year, under Antonio Pierce and Bo Hardigree? Y'all remember that? So Bo Hardigree was down on the field working with quarterbacks at the combine. I had, well, I say several, several people tell me they were stunned at how well he coached quarterbacks. And one of the guys said, I guess I shouldn't have been. Look what Aiden O'Connell did under him and then under Luke Getsy. I thought that was fascinating. Bo is a tremendous kid. And I say he's a kid. He's a lot younger than me, but he's a tremendous coach and guy. And being in Vegas for that short time did not hurt him. He's a guy. Keep your mind on him. He's a rising star. But I thought that was fascinating. I thought that you would enjoy it. All right, let's talk Raiders free agents. Robert Spillane, huge market for him. Huge. I knew it was big because I mentioned, I think it was in yesterday's podcast, but after last night and this morning texting with tons of people, uh, there are a lot of people salivating for Spilly. There's a lot of people who really like him a lot. A lot. It's fascinating to me. Not because I think he's not good. Uh, I just cannot imagine the Raiders letting him leave. But what happens is when you got $100 million in your salary cap, okay, and you're going to put 50 into Matthew. I mean, you could have done some signing bonuses and played around with the money, but just for the sake of making this conversation simple, let's say that Matthew's cap hit, which it would not have been, but would have been 50 million. Then you got to look at paying Max. Then you got to look at Spills. We're going to get into some other guys. Plus, you want a couple other free agents. I mean, the Raiders have a ton of money, but they have some legitimate needs. So Spills, big deal. Now we get to Hobbs, Nate Hobbs. His market is different. Y'all know when he's healthy, he's the best slot corner in the NFL. But he's injured a lot, and it's not because he's a wimp. Now, I talked with several teams, and I've been telling you this. You may remember, because we've been talking a lot about this. There's a lot of question marks around the Raiders' strength and conditioning. I'm not saying I have question marks. I don't know. I'm not in there. I just continue to hear it and continue to bang the drum about it because I continue to hear it. I had a couple of teams that really like Hobbs a lot. They think his injuries may have to do with what they think is a concerns of the Raiders' strength and conditioning. Others didn't have those concerns. They just thought maybe he's injury prone, not a wimp, just injury prone. I told you the previous regime of the Raiders wanted to do a 1-year prove it deal. That is not going to get Nate Hobbs. Excuse me, not it. I got ahead of myself. Sorry, that was Malcolm. I'll get to that in a minute. The previous regime liked Hobbs, but they were greatly concerned that he's injured a lot. That concern is shared by a lot of teams, but there are a lot of teams who think because of Raider strength and conditioning, and you look at all the Raiders who are injured all the time, and it seems to be pretty consistent, that think that Nate Hobbs in their system, which is common in the NFL, or we do it different. So I'm going to tell you right now, if whoever signs Nate Hobbs isn't getting him on a short deal, I would think it would be probably a 3-year deal. But there is a lot of interest in Hobbs, not as big as there is in Spills or a guy I'm going to talk about here in a minute, but there is a lot of interest in Hobbs. And if the Raiders want him back, they're not going to get him on a 1 or 2 year deal. It's going to probably have to be three, unless they overpay. But it's going to be really fascinating. And remember, I had an executive use the term to me: if you're going to go buy a great car, let's say it's a Cadillac Escalade, so it's a $1,500 a month payment, but over however long you finance the car, 25% of the time the car isn't going to run, you're not going to pay top dollar. Okay, but if you think your strength and conditioning department can fix that, then fine. But that's with Hobbs. All right, then let's talk about Butler. There is absolutely a market for Butler. I know of 4 teams specifically interested in Butler. I don't think, I think I think there is ground here for the Raiders to get him. I know that he wants to be a Raider. I believe the Raiders want him. So if the Raiders make him a fair offer, I don't expect him to go anywhere. But there are teams interested in Adam Butler for sure, and should be. He is a disciplined, gapped integrity tackle, which is hard to find, and he's a great leader. Tre'Von Merrick. I think he's very talented. Don't get me wrong here. I think he's very, very good. I was stunned, not because I don't value him. I was stunned for the market for him. Not as high as Spilly, but close. There's a lot of teams that like them some Tre'Von Merrick. And you look at him with IPM recently signed. That's a really young safety room that's really talented. This may come down to, depending on what the Raiders do at quarterback, not going and getting a big, expensive free agent. We're going to talk about some of them in a minute. May help them, and then go get a Will Howard in the third. And that frees them up to sign some of these free agents. Just throwing that out there. Malcolm Koonce. Now, this is where I got ahead of myself a minute ago. The previous regime wanted to do a 1-year prove-it deal with him. That is not going to happen. Not going to fly. There's a saying where I'm from: that dog don't hunt. That ain't happening. That just isn't going to be the reality. Malcolm Koonce is going to cost somebody some money. And I understand why the Raiders' previous regime wanted to do a prove-it deal. In 4 years, 3.5 of them, he either didn't play or didn't play very often, or was injured for 1 year, but was not really impressive, but took off under the first half year of Antonio Pierce. But he's at one of the most crucial positions in the NFL, edge, and he's got provable NFL tape. Now, I know the Raiders love him, and they want him back. They believe in him. I was told by someone within the organization that Patrick Graham's and the players and everybody else, Robbie Leonard, they're pounding the table for him. So I expect the deal to get done with Koonce. I have no idea what the parameters will be. Could it be 3 years, 60? I don't know. I just don't know. But I expect the deal. I would be surprised if Koonce did not return. So there's that. All right, let's talk about some more guys. Justin Fields. I know now, in talking to NFL people, there are multiple teams interested in Justin Fields. The Raiders have interest in just about everybody, but they're going to be intelligent. Okay. It's going to be interesting to watch what the Steelers do, because Justin Fields' people understand there's going to be a market for him. So if the Steelers decide they want to do a deal, is it a deal big enough for Fields to stay, or does he leave? Then are they stuck with Russell Wilson, who I don't think it's not a Steeler thing. I wouldn't expect them to franchise either one. So then A lot of interest here. So I would keep this in the back of your head that there's going to be a lot of interest in Justin Fields. Do I think he would make a lot of sense for the Raiders? I do think Justin Fields would make a lot of sense. Do I think they would overpay? I don't. So this is going to be fascinating because the Giants and Jets are not really one well-run teams and they overpay. So if they are, and I'm hearing that they are legitimately in on this, I think that would probably hurt the Raiders. Now, the Raiders may look at the film and say, yeah, we think he's a 3-year, $105 million guy. Okay. But I don't expect the Raiders to win a bidding war with the Jets and Giants. But here's where Brady comes in. I would expect them, if they wanted him, to be able to spend less money. The taxes in Nevada, there is no state income tax, it's through the roof in New York. To be able to give him less, but still have Brady be able to sell him with, you're my guy. You're my first quarterback that I've brought into Vegas. Interesting point there. Keep that in the back of your head. The other thing is, if Tennessee goes Abdul Carter, who's the best player in the draft, and by the way, I'll get to one more note on him in a minute. And what happens if the Giants already have a quarterback? If they go all in with Justin Fields or a Sam Darnold? Let's just say there isn't a lot of quarter. All of a sudden now, there could be a scenario. I doubt it, but I didn't think Brock Bowers would get to 13 where Cam Ward's there. If I'm the Raiders, I'm pulling the trigger on Cam Ward at 6 if he falls to me. Reminds a lot of people of Jaden Daniels, reminds a lot of people of CJ Stroud. Do I think he's a dude? Absolutely, I do not. But at 6, boy, it'd be hard to let a Cam Ward go by. Just throwing that out there. So if other teams are filling needs, Raider Nation, don't panic. Because then you could still go. Remember when they were the Redskins then, they're the Commanders now, grabbed Robert Griffin III, and then late in the draft picked up a Kirk Cousins? Remember when the Patriots had a Drake May and they go get a Joe Milton? You could see a scenario with a Cam and a Will Howard and an Aiden O'Connell to be there in the mix. Just keep that in your mind. So there you go. A lot of things going on. A lot of things going on now. People, they're gearing up towards free agency. They know what's in the draft. They've got a good mind. The draft board is starting to come together. Okay, you know what? This position we think's a little bit weaker, or this position high up is good, but not low. And we're going to do this, this, or this. We don't see a guy we would pick high. So we're going to go address this in free agency. Or, hey, there's nobody here high, but we think there are some low guys. So I'll give you an example. I was told there'll be starters this year in the NFL on the offensive line picked in the first round. I was also told there would be fourth rounders picked in the NFL draft this year. That'll be starters this year on the defensive line. So I could see a team saying, okay, you know what? We really like this guy, but okay, so let's talk interior offensive lineman. Gray Zabel is a stud. A lot of people think of him similar to how they felt about Zach Martin. Not a dude, but a stud. Okay. If you're looking at him as an interior offensive lineman, but you know there are going to be some day one starters that dropped around 5. You may say, yeah, they're not a Gray Zabel, but they are a starter. And there's not enough guys at this position. Just telling you how all the jigsaw works together. And that's how the teams begin to decide how they put together their NFL draft after they have their draft board and everything in place. All right, it's been a really long podcast. I'm traveling out of state, so I appreciate you joining me. God bless all of you. I hope that you're doing well. Thank you for joining me for a ton of information from the combine. I hope this helped you. Have a wonderful day. I'll talk to you all real soon. Thank you so much. Bye bye.